All right, so thanks so much for tuning in today. And so obviously this is a pre-recorded portion of this talk. What I'm doing is just walking through the actual walkthrough, and I'm gonna tweak it just a little bit to expedite some of the process. So in the walkthrough itself, it actually starts with a function app being built in Visual Studio 2019, which is a really awesome way to get a function app going. Obviously much more practical if you're building real robust solutions. For the purposes of this demonstration, we really just need to be able to work in Azure and be able to create a couple of quick functions to work with that we can then leverage in order to work with the APIM and lock things down. Let's go ahead and get started. So in the actual walkthrough, there is a section where you start out and you do a few commands here. The first thing you're going to do is create a resource group. So I'm just going to drop the code in here. And what I'll do is create a new resource group named Azure Functions and APIM. And then the location is going to be Central US, which is close to me. And then what I'll do is I'll just do AZ group create location and name. And so this will take just a moment to spin up the group. Obviously it's done. Awesome. So now we have our group created. And the next thing we need to do is create a storage account. Basically, all of the Azure Function apps need to have a backing storage account. So let's go ahead and set a variable for the storage account name here. It's just going to be AF and APIM store 4882, just a random. And then rather than type this, I'm just going to copy the paste the command for the storage account. So there we go, AZ storage account create -- name storage name location and resource group. And so this will take a moment to spin up the storage account, and that won't be terribly long. All right, so we have spun up our function app. So now I should be able to go out and find it here in my resource groups. There's my Azure Functions and APIM. And inside of there, there's my function app, storage account, and app service plan. In my function app here, we can go ahead and take a look and see what functions we have. And so, of course, we don't have any. Let's go ahead and add some. So this first one, we're just going to do an HTTP trigger for both of these, actually. And then we want to go ahead and name it. So this one we're going to call simple anonymous function. And the function level on that's going to be anonymous. Surprise, surprise. Go ahead and add that. And we will create one more function. And this is going to also be an HTTP trigger. And this one's also going to be, this one will be a function key value. And so simple authorization function. And essentially what we're saying here is we have two functions. Neither one of them does anything fancy. They're just the default, hey, spit out a name if you pass me a name in the query string. Likely you've seen all that before, but if you haven't, if you go to the test on these, you can easily see these running. So let's make this a little smaller for now. And so you can go to the test run and you can say, I want to get or post for these. It doesn't matter. This one is an authorization function. So likely you need a function key. And so you can just use that. Query parameter, you want to add the name, and the name is going to be, Brian or whatever you want to put there. And so you run it. Of course, it spins up, it gives you the output you're expecting to have. Hello, this is triggered. If you didn't have the query parameter, it would just say, you need to pass a query parameter. All right, so we have these two functions. We have them all ready to go. You could test the other one if you want. I trust that it's working. Anyway, what I need to do is I need to get from these functions, I need to get the actual function URLs. And what we're going to do is we're going to prove that they're accessible to the world via these function URLs in a couple different ways. So as long as I have the key, which is somewhat secure. So there you see that's working. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that, and I'm going to take that to Postman. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that you end up having a function that's available to the world, and as soon as one bad player decides to give away your function key, you don't have any way to protect it. So we'll just name this call simple authorized function. Collection we'll just do APIM AF, doesn't matter. Create that, save it. Okay, so now if we send this request, we don't have the URL. If we send that request there, it's working the way we'd expect. Whatever name we put in the query string comes back just like we would expect. Let's save that. Let's add one more request, and let's go get the function key for the anonymous one. The simple anonymous function, the function URL, excuse me, not the function key. So grab that. This one, of course, doesn't need a key. There's nothing preventing it from working. So there we see. Now, both of my requests are available. Let's go ahead and save that. So we'll call this one simple anonymous function. We'll save that. And so under my collections now, you see I have my simple authorized function and my simple anonymous function. And they're available. They're available to the world. Anybody who pushes the button on this and has the get or the post URL with the function key can get this one. This one's open to the world and not protected. What we want to do is get this protected so that some random person can't just call my functions without me knowing who they are and preventing them if I don't want them in there. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to lock down our function app. So we go back to our function app, and we're going to look for the authorization over here, authentication and authorization. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill into this, and we're going to tell the world that you can't get in unless you're authenticated. And we're going to do two things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up Azure Active Directory to be our authentication protocol. And we're also going to block people who aren't authenticated from getting in. So we'll do that in a second. We'll show you that in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and just create our Azure Active Directory settings. So we'll start off by creating an express. We can name this app whatever we want. I'm just going to leave it to be the same as the function app. If you want to do common data service permissions, go for it. You don't need to. So we're going to go ahead and OK this and make sure you save. Of course, there's that double save that you might forget to do and then not have your authentication. So right now it says I have to be authenticated with Azure Active Directory, right? So you would think it would be locked down. So if I send my request, I should see a 401. Oh, it's respinning up the app because I changed the settings. So, okay, it's still working. What's going on? Well, why? I thought I just blocked everybody. No, there was one more step I didn't do. So you see here, anonymous access is enabled in the app service app. Users will not be prompted for a login. So you see right here, we allowed it. So that's why I wanted to save this for now, so we could prove that we need to do this as well. So we're going to say the only way you can log in is with Azure Active Directory. So once again, we'll save that. I'm not sure what just failed there. And let's go back into here and let's change this over to advanced. Nope, not yet. Okay. So let's just go back in and see if it's saved with the authorization authentication. And it's still allowing anonymous for some reason. So let's try this again. Guess I just got too fast for it. Okay, so now we definitely are saved so that we have to be authenticated. So if I go back to Postman now, again, we're probably spinning up here for a second. But now I see I don't have permission. I got the 401. So we have now successfully blocked everybody from getting in. And the only way you can get in is if you somehow have authenticated to use the application. So one more thing I want to do is I want to go back into my Active Directory settings. And I'm going to go ahead and change this to advanced. And the reason I want to do this is because I need to know what this client ID is going to be. So I'm just going to store this in handy notepad for a minute. And I also want to know what my secret is. I'm going to need that eventually. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab that. And hide that again. It doesn't really matter. This is a volatile account. Obviously, by the time you're watching this, it won't even matter. So I'm not super worried about you having my secret. Everything is set up now. So we do have our authentication. Everything is blocked. And we have our application configured to use this advanced Active Directory. If I go to it even in the web now, it shouldn't let me in unless I authenticate. So if I go look at my functions right now and I grab, let's just do the anonymous one that didn't even need a function key. I grab my function URL here in a second. And I try to call this. It says, oh, your permissions are requested. So now I do have to authenticate in order to get in, which is what I expected. So I'm going to go ahead and let this happen. And now I can actually get in. So at least I can get in like I would expect if I've authenticated on my account with my Active Directory user. And so that's good news. All right, so what I want to do next is I want to actually spin up an APIM instance so that I can build a facade around my functions that I created in order to make sure that I can then work with my functions even though they're locked down. So I'm going to spin this up, and you can do it through through the Azure Cloud Shell. But I'm actually going to go ahead and, now that I'm looking at this, I'm actually going to just do this through the actual portal just for today. So go to API Management. We're going to go ahead and create one. And we're going to put it into our same resource group, same location. The resource name has to be unique. And so, I'm going to go ahead and try something like my public API. And if that's available, okay, it's already in use. So let's go 987654321. It doesn't matter. That's surely not in use. Okay, and my organization name is whatever I want it to be. So I'm just going to call this, we'll call this APIM Masters or something. I don't know. And my administrator email is going to be my email. So that's mandalorianboba@hotmail.com. And the pricing tier. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the consumption plan. That will spin up much more quickly. If you choose one of the other plans, you'll have a little more power, especially around things like throttling requests and using IP restrictions and things like that the consumption plan doesn't currently allow you to do. And basically, that's just the way it works. So the developer plans also have, developer and better plans also have a public-facing kind of like a discovery portal so that you can expose your APIs to people just coming in and viewing the website, which you can then build how to look how you want them to look, kind of like a Swagger page or whatever. This is going to turn on my application insights, and I'm just going to use the same instance that I used for my function app. My scale doesn't matter when I'm consumption. My status here is for system managed identity. And so this I ultimately do want on. I'm going to leave it off on purpose now. If you're doing this on your own, you could save yourself a little time. Just go ahead and turn it on now. We will need this in the future in order to communicate, but I want to turn it off to prove that, so I want to keep it off. And a virtual network doesn't matter, and protocol settings, I'm just going to leave everything off as the default. I don't need anything special right now. If you needed to do something different, like you wanted to use HTTP2 or one of the older TLSs or the SSL3, you'd have to turn that on. Tags, of course, just tags your resources. Let's go ahead and spin this up. Now this will take 2 to 3 minutes to spin up. So while this is spinning up, I just want to show you a couple other things, just in case you ever need information. Now we're not going to need it for our current walkthrough, but I want to show you these things because it's important for you to know where they're at in case you don't know where they're at. So this will take some time, so let's just go ahead and open another window quickly. So if you wanted to find out information about your application, when you created your function app, you actually got behind the scenes an app registration created. So let's go ahead and look at our app registrations. And here you see there's my app. And again, this client ID is going to be super important to us in a little bit. And we have one redirect URI. So if I wanted to see that, this is going to be for my callbacks. So here you see I have the AF and APIM FA4844, I can't read. That's my callback if I'm ever going to try to directly authenticate. And you see that that's there. And then one other thing about this is if I want any of the endpoints, they're right here. So here's all my endpoints for OAuth login, OAuth token, older versions, Microsoft Graph endpoint, different things that are available in order for you to communicate with your application that's out there for you. So we don't necessarily need any of that for our current run through. We will need, again, this application client ID. That's going to be really important. So make sure you have that handy. All right, so my deployment's complete. So I'm going to go to my resource group and then drill into my APIM. Yeah, it's the best way to get there, right? Okay, so we're there. So what are we going to do with the APIM? So what in the heck is this even for? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a facade that lets people come into our Azure functions without us having to authenticate them, but also locking it down so only people we want in can get in. And we can, of course, get to the Azure functions if we authenticate, but this will allow us to put a facade on it, and not only will they continue to not even know, we can get it to the point where they don't even know what functions they're calling behind the scenes, but even if they did, they wouldn't be able to call those functions directly. So we can control who gets access to what through different APIs that we expose, products, and subscriptions. And I'm going to show you all that here in a minute. But that's the whole point of using this. Now, the APIM is much more powerful than what we're going to do today, of course, as well. There are different things you can do. You could actually not just use one function app, but you could use multiple function apps, or you could use your function app and some third-party API. Wrap all of that together and put it in one facade, and then your users only need to know one public-facing URL. They call that with their subscription key, and they are able to do the things that they need to do. You further have the granular control then of saying you're only allowed to see this part of the API based on the subscription or product that you're using. So the first thing you need is some APIs. So when you want to create an API, if you have a function app, it's very easy. You just click on the function app. And so here we're going to go ahead and browse for our function app, and we'll find it over here, AF and APIM FA4844. Now note that this one allows me to bring in both of the functions, one or more. So let's just use a little bit of contrived example here, split this up a little bit. Let's say that the simple anonymous function is going to be available through this facade, this API. So let's call this one public, or something like public. We'll call it, how about we call it all public data, like the walkthrough. And then that name will be in there, and the URL suffix, let's change that so it's not so wonky. AF and APIM FA4844 isn't something I really want to remember. So I will change this to public. So there we see, now I have my public URL with that public namespace or whatever you want to call it behind it. URL query string, whatever you want to call it. So this is a public data API. You see here I have my get and my post. If I drill into this right now, I'm going to run my test on it. You can see I actually have a public facing URL, and sorry, that's here. There's my request URL. If I were to actually go out to the world and call that right now, send it through here first. So I get my 401 unauthorized, just like I would expect, because Azure Functions doesn't know who I am, even though I'm using a function app within, or even though I'm using APIM within Azure, it doesn't authenticate against the function app. So you still get the 401, which is great because we haven't told it who it is, so it shouldn't let us in. So we do have our function set there, but we aren't able to do anything. Let's create one more API just to continue giving us a little bit of an overview of what we could do with this thing. So let's add another API. This time, let's get the same function app. Ordinarily, you probably would have multiple function apps, or again, a different source here. This time, let's go ahead and do the authorization and the simple anonymous. So whoever has access to this subscription would have both of the function calls available to them. So with this, we're going to call all customer data, and we will name the suffix here customer. So again, public API, customer, and then whatever the name of the function call is. So this one, again, is going to have both. So it has multiple methods. We could test these again just to prove, things aren't working. We still are unauthorized. Again, we have right now this public API function call that's available, but we want to actually not let our users in there. We want to give our users, we want to block them down. So even if someone called that, they wouldn't have access once these do authenticate. Right now they don't authenticate, but eventually they will. We don't want them to be open to the world. That would be just as bad as the rest of it. So this is where we're going to use our API management solution to create some products and then some subscriptions on those products to allow people in with specific subscription keys. And so let's go ahead and make a product. And this product we will call unrestricted. And it's just going to be the, this is the public data product. We'll go ahead and publish it. And let's leave require subscription on there. And we don't care about the counts or the terms. And then we'll select the API, and that's going to be the all public data. So let's, for sake of showing something, let's turn this back to not published. And we'll go ahead and select that API that we want all public data. And we will go ahead and create this one. We see it's not published. Let's go ahead and create a second product. This one's going to be a client product. And we will publish this one. And the requires approval means that you can't get into the subscription until someone actually, like an admin, says, okay, yeah, you're actually getting a subscription. Without that, you can just get a subscription. So we're going to leave that unchecked. So for this one, we're going to take the all customer data API. And again, it's going to require the API subscription. This is going to say, this is the customer data API. And we'll go ahead and create this one. And just so that we can show this, you can easily publish and unpublish from over here in the ellipses. So we want both of these published. So now I have two different functions available, or two different products available, excuse me. But now what I want to do, since I said that both of them require a subscription, nobody can get in. And so you see 0 subscriptions, nobody can get in through this product right now. So what I want to do is actually use that subscription. And I need to create it. So this is the client. So we need to do something like a premium subscription here. The names have to be unique. This is a really tricky thing. So if you want to have multiple premium subscriptions across different products, you need to make sure the name itself is unique. The display name can always just be premium. So I'm going to say client premium. And that will create a subscription. And then I'm going to grab the subscription key here. Again, this is volatile, so I'm not super worried about you knowing my keys. And I can just rotate them, because as soon as I don't want anybody to use that key anymore, I can just say rotate the primary key or the secondary key, or I can just suspend the subscription altogether. So pretty cool things, ways to lock down bad players that way as well. If you've given out the secondary key to one of your clients and they're doing some terrible things, you can stop the secondary key by regenerating it. And then anybody with the primary key still going, secondary key, they're blocked. All right, so that subscription is done. And so you see that's over here in the subscriptions. Also, you see the APIs that are available to this product. You see the settings that we did before and any policies that are specific to this product. Right now, there aren't any, and we're not going to do anything with that. So that's another day's training if you want to look into that. But you also see here subscriptions. Now my premium will be listed there. I can also get my keys from over here. And it notes the scope. That's the product client. So currently, there's a built-in subscription that everybody's using or was using that basically said, you're able to run using this all access subscription, but we're going to give these to our clients. So our premium clients or basic clients would have different subscriptions and different keys at different access levels. And so this is the premium. Now I need to create one more subscription. So I can do it from here, or I can go back into my products. I want to go to my unrestricted. I'm going to create a basic, not an API, excuse me. A basic subscription here. All right, so this is going to be called public basic with subscription name basic. And that'll give us a subscription there. And then I need that key as well. So let me just grab that key and we'll go ahead and drop that over in my little handy dandy notepad. So now I have two products and I have different APIs exposed through those products. I have different subscriptions on each of those products so that I can give clients different access level to my different APIs and function keys. Sorry, I'm getting all clicky here. All right, so what I really care about now, before I do any of the authentication part, I want to make sure that Postman still can connect and do the things it is supposed to do, and I want to make sure it's working, that it's not working, so successfully failing with the 401 before I actually turn on the authentication so that I'm good to go. So I'm going to open up Postman and create two more requests. And so here, let's just add a new request. And this one we'll call this one API public data get simple auth. And we'll save that one. And then let's add one more request. Now, obviously, I'm also being very simple here and not using posts or anything like that, but those would work just the same as you would expect them to. So this is the get customer data with function auth. And again, that's going to go against a different subscription. So what I want is I want to grab the public and the customer APIs that we are using from the APIM exposed endpoint. And I want to use those in my Postman. So if I go back to my APIs, so this is my all customer data and all public data APIs. In the all customer data, let's get the simple anonymous function, simple authorized function. So again, we're just going to use the get. And here you see a number of things happening. If we go to the test, I can grab this request URL. Now note that there is a subscription key here in the request. That's going to be important in a second. And also you can apply the product scope. Watch the subscription key when I do this. You see it changes. So we know something's going on there. That's going to be important in a minute. So I'll take this simple authorization function and I'm going to drop that URL into my all customer data. And then I'm going to send this. And what we see is now I get an access denied due to missing subscription key. So even though I hit the public authorization portal, whatever, from the API through that customer simple authorization function URL that's exposed, I have to have a subscription or I can't do anything. That's exactly what we want. And so in order to make that work, all I need to do is get the subscription key. And that is used with a header called OCP APIM subscription key, which is right here. And you can add that to your headers very easily. And then the key is just the key that we got from our subscription that we created before. So if you didn't have it, you could drill back in to your subscriptions, find the premium subscription here in this case, grab the primary or secondary key, it doesn't matter, and drop that value in here. And then once you do that, now I get back to my 401. So I have successfully failed. I am past the API, but I'm back to failing from Azure Active Directory, which is exactly what I wanted. But my API is also locked down now. If I try to call this from the web, because the subscriptions are on it, access denied due to missing subscription key. So I'm no longer getting through, I'm blocked, which is exactly what we want. And finally, I want to create that other request for the all public data get simple auth, and that's going to go through the all public data get simple auth. And again, this is the same thing going on here, where I have my simple anonymous function. Once again, it would fail for subscription, which is what we want. I'm going to drop that into my request here, prove that it fails for subscription here. I'm going to grab the same header, OCP APIM subscription key. I'm going to drop that here, and then I'm going to put my basic subscription key in there. And now I'll get back to, it would help if I put that in the headers and not in the parameters. Okay, now I'm back to a successful fail. So I've set up Postman now, though, that once the authentication is in place, I will no longer need to authenticate from Postman from the public world, as long as I have a good subscription and my API management solution is telling my function app who it is and they agree to communicate. And so that's the last thing we want to get wired up here. And so there are a couple of critical steps to that. Now, first of all, if you remember when we created the API, I had mentioned you should just give it a managed identity. Well, I didn't, because I wanted to show that that's critical. So we can't get through without the managed identity. And I wanted to show you in case you have one in place and you need to know how to do this. If you didn't for some reason, you can easily do this. So you go and you find your managed identities in your security. If you can't find it, you can always search for it. And we're just going to turn this on and save it. It's a system assigned. Yes, we want this to have a managed identity. Now that allows this resource, of course, to communicate inside of Azure as an Azure authorized service. With that managed identity, it can communicate against the other services. So if you had other apps that needed to connect to your function apps, you could do something similar with a managed identity or through some other authorization scheme where you log into that app as yourself and do the user impersonation from that app into function apps. So this takes a minute, of course, to assign the managed identity. All right, so we have an object ID, so we're good to go. There's nothing else to do here. In fact, we don't even need this object ID. We just need it to be authorized. So we are now back to the point where we are authorized, but how do I communicate with my Azure functions? So I need to tell my Azure functions who I am and that I'm going to authenticate. And in order to do that, I'm just going to add a policy to all my API calls. Now, the nice thing about this is it makes it so that all the APIs work. So if you wanted, though, maybe you only want to impersonate for one of them and you need to make people do some other authentication schema for the other one before they can get through, or whatever you're going to do. You have all that flexibility available to you. But if you want to apply across the board for all APIs, you can do that here. You're going to click on the inbound policy, which gives you this awesome XML. And we want an inbound policy. And this inbound policy is going to be a very simple statement. Authentication managed identity resource is going to be your function client app. So I wrote that down before. I'm going to drop that in here and save it, and then I'll again remind you where you can get that, just in case. So you see it is here now. It's in place. You see that it does have my resource with my function app ID. Again, if I can't remember what that is, I just go to my app registrations. And under my app registrations, there it's right there, but it's very easy to grab it from right here. So there's my application client ID. That's the only thing I needed to be able to authenticate from the APIM into my Azure function backend. And so with that, if I go ahead now and test on any of these methods, I can go ahead and provide my query parameter for the name as well. And let's go ahead and run this. And we're at 200 OK. So that's awesome. And we see somewhere along the way that it's going to spit out the information that we wanted it to say. So that means that if I go back into Postman now and I run my authorized function, successfully worked. I forgot to give it a parameter here. So let's say name, and it's going to say awesome user. And we'll send that through. And it worked. And same thing for my public data here. We'll just do another name. Again, these are just the demo functions that just take that name in the query string. You would obviously do more than that in the real world. But what have we proven? Now we've proven that we can very easily lock down our Azure functions and have them available, that we can expose them through the APIM or the API management. And with that, you create these products. Those products then group who you want to get into specific APIs. You have the subscriptions on those products that allow the specific players to work. You can use those subscriptions for more things. So there's a lot more to learn here. This is going to be the end of our demo today, but you could dive deeper. And we actually at OpsAgility have something on that too. So if you want to get a little more training on this application security stuff, we actually have a challenge. So look for that in the future, where you'll be doing some of the similar stuff you did today, but much more deep dive into things like throttling requests and looking for information from the key vaults and how to make all of that work together nicely as some more security functions and things you need to do. With that, of course, that means that there's more that you could do on your own as well. You can continue to learn those things. But what you can see here is that we are definitely locked down from the function level. We're locked down from the API management level. The only calls that are working are our subscription calls or our authenticated calls to the function itself as an authenticated user. And so that's going to wrap up this walkthrough. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot and found this useful. I certainly have enjoyed being able to deliver this to you today. And I would love to hear any feedback you have on ways I can make it better. Or if you see something that I'm doing that you think is a security issue, I would be super interested to hear that, as well as if you have a better way to do something. That would be even more fun. So let me know. I'd love to chat with you about any of this afterwards. Thanks a lot.